Can you prove systemic racism? As in, can you prove that the UK is systemically racist and that you are in danger and that you don't have white privilege, et cetera, et cetera? Now, I have an engineering background. I studied engineering at uni. So I tend to try and approach things in a systematic kind of way, kind of premise one, premise two type of thing. And I took that challenge. I thought, you know what? I need to educate this brother who fails to see the kind of oppression that we're under. And in the process of doing that, I learned that actually a lot of the narratives and beliefs that I'd come to hold, especially around race, especially around culture, were just untrue.
It's such an oversaturated industry that you kind of have to make your own work in order to get seen by people. So just surround yourself with people who are doing that.
And I guess it must be difficult when difficult to build an audience of your own, because I guess it requires so much work to actually get things going. So you can kind of be reliant on who's got jobs, who's got opportunities, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the like who you know thing as opposed to what you know. Yeah. Which is, I imagine, quite different to your work. We might as well get into your work and what you do. I'm curious, could you tell me how did you get into this? And how long have you been making these videos?
Yeah, so I've been a YouTuber for about 7 years, content creation for about 7 years. And I initially got into it because I was leading Bible studies at university. So as a student, I've been a Christian since I was 16, went to uni, was part of a great church, and there were opportunities to do Bible studies there. And when you're at uni, everything's like a little bubble. It's like you think you know the world, but you don't know the world because it's nothing like the real world. You're literally 5 minutes walk from everybody. Anybody you want to see, less than 10, 15 minutes is pushing it. So at university, it was a great opportunity to connect with people, especially people who wanted to learn more about the faith. When I came back from uni and moved back to London with in my parents' house at the time, you realize, wow, you were 2 minutes away from me before and you live like an hour and a half. You live in Surrey.
Yeah.
Who lives in Surrey? I live in North London. You live in Surrey. What's that about? So that's when I thought, well, if I still want to be able to connect with people and share some of the things that God has placed in my heart, then how can I do that? And YouTube seemed like a great opportunity for that. Fortunately, I had a bit of an advantage because I used to do photography, freelance, part-time. So I had a camera. I knew how to work a DSLR, knew a little bit about videography because you kind of cross over a little bit. So the technical aspects of starting the channel wasn't a challenge for me. And it was just about jumping into it. So initially it was a hobby really for, I'd say about 5 or 6 years until I really saw the potential of these algorithms, man. Like the first video that I had, which took off, so to speak, hundreds of thousands of views in 24 hours.
So it started off as an evolution of what you were doing before and sort of Christian. I know it's called Faith Talks, your website. So that's where it began.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was Faith Talks was the first channel that I had, and that's where things began. I saw how the power that these algorithms have, man. It's incredible. So I thought, wow, there could be an opportunity to put more time and effort into this and make something of it. So I then started to invest a bit more time into it, was working part-time, doing mostly full-time, then transitioned to part-time so I could do a bit more with YouTube. And last year, around the beginning of autumn, is when I set up my new channel, Emmanuel Ayoola, which is probably where you found me from, I'm guessing. Yeah. And that channel, when I set up that channel, it was the same time that I dived into YouTube, essentially full-time. But the reason that I established that channel, 2 reasons. One is that even though I was really interested in Christianity and apologetics, so giving people reasons to trust in Christianity is true, not just something that's nice to have, but actually something that's grounded in history, reason, morality, and truth. I also was just looking at the state of the country and the state of the world and had so many opinions on what was going on, especially being someone who is expected to think a certain way and just going against the grain, essentially, and not seeing the country, not seeing patriotism, not seeing, conversations about immigration the same way that as what people would expect of me. My wife got tired of me just talking to her about it over the kitchen. And it's like, why don't you just, talk about this base? Yeah, why don't you just talk about this on your platform? And that's when I set up my second channel with the hope of helping people see that being proud of Christian Britain or Britain and its Christian heritage is not racist. It's not evil. It's not xenophobic. It's not only a legitimate thing, but it's actually a good thing for good reasons. And that's what that channel's all about. So yeah, that's where led me to where I am now.
Yeah, sick. Yeah. So Were you always, because I would say you veer towards conservatism, definitely. Were you always that way inclined? I sort of grew up I've got a lot of actor friends. I live in a very liberal sphere, but I feel like I wouldn't say necessarily conservative. I'd say I'm more neutral. I guess the word now that people are using is based, where you like understand what's going on, and it's not so radical. I think a lot of people on the left don't realize that their opinions are quite radical. Were you one way before? I certainly grew up and I was just every left possible. I think Stephen Fry describes it as milksop left, and I sort of then kind of centered myself, and I still think I'm there today. Did you start there, and you were just, or were you holding these beliefs for a long time, and you just really wanted to talk about them?
So when I was younger, I was like a fish in water that didn't know whether it was wet or not. It's like you're just kind of you're just in an environment. This is just what you know.
Yeah.
So growing up, I wouldn't have considered myself conservative or progressive or anything, because my main focus as a child growing up was really, how do I fit in? I wasn't thinking about, economics and migration and stuff. I was thinking, I get bullied in school, I've got low self-esteem. How do I not hate myself every day, basically? So what that led me to do is, I went to a school in North London, and I looked around and thought, who are the guys that are popular? Who are the guys that get all the girls? Who are the guys that get respect? Because I want that. In my context, that happened to be people who were exceptional at sports, drug dealers, rappers. And so I was decent at sports, but never exceptional. Drug dealing seemed like something I shouldn't do, something I definitely shouldn't do. But then, eventually, and I had no musical gift whatsoever. And there were also people around me who kind of lured me into the appeal of what some of the bad stuff could lead to. So, drugs, fraud, some of those things as a means to get quick money. And people don't realize just how easy it is for young people in London, especially young black people in London, to fall into that kind of lifestyle. It's so, the forces around you are so crazy. So I kind of dipped my toe into that a little bit and noticed two things. One is that I wasn't cut out for that life. There's a saying that people used to say, they'd call me a good youth from a good home. And it's this idea that, you've got parents at home that you're hiding this from, telling you not to do this stuff. This is not your lifestyle. And it was true. But the second thing was, even when I made like small, quick cash and stuff like that, it was never fulfilling, never meaningful. So that led me onto a kind of soul search. Like, this doesn't work. They don't really love me for who I am. They love me for the character I can play. That led to a bit of a soul search, which eventually led to me hearing about the gospel message of Christianity, that we're all dead in our sins, but can be forgiven through Christ and can be born again. That was when I became a Christian around 16 years old, completely left all of the nonsense that I was doing behind. And that then made me start thinking more deeply about impact and more deeply about being able to benefit the people around me. So I then start looking at my friends, looking at people who, I had loads of friends who grew up without dads. It was a big problem. Like, parents' evening was like a mum's club. It's just how it was, right? And that really, as I got older, I started to learn a bit more about the impact of that, like how that starts to affect people. That then got me to think a lot more deeply about how I can help. So I worked in the charity sector for a long time with organizations that worked with young people and stuff like that. But then through all of that, I then initially, you kind of get sucked into a bit more of a left-leaning liberal view of the world, because the charity sector is pretty much liberal, left-wing.
That's what it is, yeah.
A lot of our institutions are as well. And so you don't realize a lot of the ideas you have about the UK and its history, and seeing the UK as like the chief villain of all historical evils, like slavery, as if the UK was the only one that, all that stuff, right? You start to then hear these things over and over again, and you're in that environment, so it just feels normal. But at the same time, there were certain aspects of the liberal worldview that clearly didn't resonate with me. So things like, what is a man, what is a woman? For me, that's an open shut conversation, because especially, but I guess from my perspective, both reality and also my Christian background as well.
Yeah, of course.
So there were always aspects where you kind of can't fully go into it, but I never really heard alternative perspectives. And so I, grew up hearing that the Conservatives were evil and racist, and that the rest of the country outside of London was evil and racist. So I need to be scared of white people and all that kind of stuff. These are the kind of things that you just subtly hear and don't question or don't challenge. And it was around 2020 when some of those ideas really started to really came fully crashing down. Really came fully.
What was it? Because I feel like the pandemic was a big time. Certainly for me, that was my big shift. I think I saw Russell Brand's channel, and that started to make me shift and think about maybe there were other things going on that I hadn't considered. I feel like it's really difficult when you're in that echo chamber. It's like you look up the news and they're all saying the same thing, and they're all actively outright lying, not just not telling the truth, but they're just completely lying 180 about what is actually the case. So what was it that led you to that in 2020?
Yeah, for me, it was one simple question that somebody asked me. So Black Lives Matter had just happened. George Floyd died. Right. And everybody everywhere is putting black squares on their Instagrams. Everybody's saying that if you're not anti-racist, then you're racist. If you're not standing, if you're not protesting, then you're racist and evil. And around that time, I also bought the narrative that what happened to George Floyd is not only proof of the systemic injustice against black people across the US, it's also proof of the systemic injustice against black people everywhere, everywhere. Yeah. And so then, I initially felt the same kind of impetus that a lot of people felt to say something and to stand up and all that. And there's one guy, another black guy from the church that I used to attend, who just basically sent me a WhatsApp message and said, can you prove systemic racism? Like, as in, can you prove that the UK is systemically racist and that you are in danger and that you don't have white privilege, et cetera, et cetera? Now, I have an engineering background. I studied engineering at uni. So I tend to try and approach things in a systematic kind of way, kind of premise one, premise two type of thing. And I took that challenge. I thought, you know what? I need to educate this brother who fails to see the kind of oppression that we're under. And in the process of doing that, I learned that actually a lot of the narratives and beliefs that I'd come to hold, especially around race, especially around culture, were just untrue. And from there, that led on to a deeper or much further journey, which I'm still on, of just learning how much the world around us and how much the institutions around us can shape the narratives that we come to believe, even when they're not objectively true.
Sure. Yeah, I'm curious actually, because that's a big topic right now, is systemic racism, and it's something. What was that book that came out a few years ago? I'm no longer talking to white people about race. I don't know if you read that. That was a great book, but it's that interesting thing of, I don't think systemic racism is as big of a thing as people say it is. I don't necessarily. Again, I'm sort of neutral in a lot of stances. I wouldn't say that it doesn't exist at all, because obviously there's a historic racism in this country that is led sort of through generations. It's same in like America. It's like there's a history of impoverished black people in America, and that's clearly, it explains where they've got to today. And I think it explains, obviously, though it's different here, it explains where we've got to today. But what was the...
Does it?
Do you not think?
I think the narrative that black people in the UK and black people in the US, first of all, the narrative that they're wholesale oppressed, I think is untrue. Secondly, the narrative that all of the issues that communities may face is down to racism, I think is also untrue. I think they're both demonstrably false, both in the UK and in the US.
Sure.
What happens a lot of the time, though, is like US racial grievances kind of get imported into the UK all the time.
Yeah.
But I think it's, and I'll give you an example of the one that really started to open my eyes on this topic, and then opened me up to the idea that maybe Britain's history isn't something to be ashamed of. That then led me to thinking, actually, there's so much to be proud of, which we can talk about. But just on the systemic injustice piece, one of the big pieces of evidence a lot of people point to prove systemic injustice or systemic racism against black people and white privilege is pregnancy outcomes, basically. Like, you hear a lot of people talk about how black women are the numbers 4 times more likely to die in childbirth, 6 times more likely to die in childbirth, 7 times and stuff. Then people ask why. And the answer is always unconscious bias. Nurses think that black women are stronger, so they don't respond to their needs as much. And the answer is always basically white people are oppressing black people. That's kind of the answer. It's just about finding the example.
I saw your video about that as well, because they didn't the NHS divert resources for that?
Exactly
purpose?
that. So loads of NHS trusts around the country are setting up or have already set up specific departments in their midwifery teams for mainly Black, but also other ethnic minority women. So what that means is that a typical midwife might have 90 different women who she's dedicated to, just of that area, right? So, you know, you can base the ratio of people, that's the ratio, like 90 patients to one midwife. For particular teams, you might have one midwife who's only dedicated towards 20 or 30 ethnic minority women. So that means that the level of attention a Black or ethnic minority woman will get should be higher. Whether that happens in practice, it should be higher based on the aims and objectives. So for one, that's obviously unequal, because if you're a white woman, then you have less access to your midwife than if you were a Black woman in the same area. Obviously, the counter that many people would say is, well, that's because they need extra attention or they need extra care. But let's think about that. Okay, if we go back to that statistic around Black women having a greater risk of death in pregnancy, there's a couple of things to consider. First of all, only like 1 in 99,000 white women will die in childbirth, or 6 in 99,000 white women will die in childbirth, compared to like 49 Black women in 99,000 women will die in childbirth. So this is not like a huge systemic issue. It's very rare. Like pregnancy is overwhelmingly safe for Black and white women. So when they say 6 times,
and so the excuses they think because nurses are making racist comments on the side that Black women are more likely to die in childbirth or have birth
if I was
problems.
to strongman that position, I would say they're arguing something like this. Black women are more likely to be seen as tough and resilient because of racial stereotypes. So when they have certain pains or when they make certain complaints during their pregnancy, the midwives are less likely to take it seriously. That's what they would say. But I'm thinking, if it was a case that all over the country, midwives were just overlooking Black women's concerns and they were in this grave danger, you'd have a lot more than 6 in 99,000 dying from childbirth. Like you would have, it would be a much bigger issue than that. So that's the first thing.
Yeah, of course.
The second thing is, in cities like London, I mean, I don't know the last time you went to a hospital, most of the nurses are ethnic minorities. So you can't make the argument that all over the place, you know, it's a white on Black kind of thing. But the third piece, and I think this is most important and why this kind of thing is quite dangerous, and I speak about it, is that when you look statistically about the biggest thing, the thing that impacts pregnancy outcomes the most, it is a woman's weight. Whether she's overweight, whether she's obese, whether she's a healthy weight. You know, you can look at the National Institute for Health. It's an American organization, but I think they've done international studies on this. So weight is the biggest factor in a woman's pregnancy. If she's in a healthy weight, that significantly increases the chance of good outcomes, significantly decreases the chances of bad outcomes. So nobody seems to have asked the question, maybe some of the pregnancy discrepancies might have something to do with weight. When you look at ONS data, you see that Black Caribbean women are the most obese women in the UK, just as a share or percentage of obesity amongst that community. Now, this is not even to shame Black women, Black Caribbean women. Black Africans are also quite highly represented, whereas Chinese women, I think it's like 10% of Chinese women are obese or overweight, right? Like, when was the last time you saw an obese Chinese woman, right? Like, I can't think of it.
Yeah.
Now, but what that means is that maybe the difference in health outcomes, and that can be the same for diabetes or the same for, you know, or for the same for heart problems or other issues that might be higher in certain communities than others, might come down to factors other than racism. Right? But they never even think that. Yeah. That's not even, like, even what I've just said now, if I said this at a charity event, it would be considered harmful, not even a microaggression, it would just be considered racist. If you said this, you would be effectively called into HR. If I say it, I might still be called into HR because I'm a man, but at least because I'm Black, people will listen to it a bit more. And I'm just like, it shouldn't be that way. You know, because if we're thinking about actually helping people's outcomes, then the facts matter regardless of the color of the person telling it.
Yeah. Why do you think it is that they come to those conclusions? Because it does feel inherently political that they hear that number and they go, okay, it must be racism. We're going to divert loads of resources. I imagine that's happening in loads of other places. I know you've spoken a little bit about, was it 140 million pounds the NHS uses for translation services? And it's like, in the age of AI, why are we spending 140 million pounds when you could just chat GPT everything? It's free. Everybody's got a phone. Everybody can go on and use that. So why is it a political stunt on behalf of Labour or who's in power? Why do you?
I mean,
think
great
that's
question. If you
the
went
case?
to, I mean, I went to France. My wife fortunately speaks French.
Yeah.
She's from Congo, so she speaks French.
Okay.
I went to France. I've been to France 2 occasions. Oddly, on both occasions, I've had to go to the hospital. And if you do not speak French, they will not help you. You have to find someone.
Right,
But fortunately, you know, I went with my wife on one occasion. The other occasion, the person was bilingual, happened to be, and people are generally able to help you. But for some reason, there's this idea that in the UK, as a government, we're responsible, or our nation is responsible for providing these kind of services for people. And often many of these people know this. So what's drawing them to come to the UK is services like this. So you're not actually getting the best of the best in terms of workers wholesale, because they realize this is the kind of thing that we get. Just before I answer the question about why this is the case, just to try and help people see the scale of the problem. 78% of Somalians in the UK live in social housing. Okay, that's just a statistic, not a judgment either way. But Somalians in the UK send over £100 million in remittances back to Somalia. So I think after the US, we're the largest remittance provider for Somalia as a nation. Their economy would not survive without remittances from here. But what that means is that there are people who have come to the UK knowing that there's a welfare state they can depend on, and then send money back to the countries of origin. So, you know, surely that's something that should be looked at, right? That goes against the whole idea of all immigration. You can't even look at any particular types of immigration. All immigration is good, and anything you say against it is bad. In terms of why that's the case, I think there are different levels to this. So when you speak to your friend about this, or if I was speaking to a younger person, the reason that they see it this way is because that's just the narrative that they've been told. For example, if you're a young black student or Asian student looking to apply to Oxford or Cambridge University right now, you're going to see adverts for special programs designed to help you get into those institutions because you're black. And the language that you'll hear would be things like, you know, equity and helping those who are less privileged. So you buy into the idea that there are privileges you don't have purely because of the color of your skin. Never mind the fact that you could be a black person with 2 parents who are high earning and have had a tutor, whereas a white kid down the road comes from a single mom household. Never mind that. You know, you're black, they're white, end of. I think that's the kind of messaging that comes through for a lot of people, and you see it, you know, media and language. Even, for example, when we had the riots in the protests and the riots in 2024, I want to say, after Southport, and how quick Keir Starmer was to talk about the far right racists everywhere. That kind of language, when you hear it, people adopt it, and so the use of the word far right has increased like so much since that speech he gave. Course. So there's that. But then behind that, why do the institutions and the powers that be push forward these messages and push forward these narratives? I think on the one hand, it's recently we've seen you can get a lot of power by playing into these kind of racial grievances and ethnic grievances. So for example, the Labour Party, is a very well-known secret that they depend very heavily on the Muslim vote. One of the reasons for that is that Muslim voters, or it's very easy to capture Muslim votes in blocks, because a lot of people, basically like the imams of many of their mosques, are able to go to numbers of them and say, look, give me your ballot votes, and we're gonna, you know, vote for this MP, we're gonna vote for that person. So I can't remember his name. I think his name's Ali Raj, a Muslim from Oldham, spoke a lot about this happening. So what that means is there's then perverse incentives for politicians to play into some of the grievances that these communities have, or basically painting them as victims and then them as saviors in order to win their votes. It's the same things happened with, you know, black people. I don't think black people as a community aren't as cohesive as Islam as a community. So they play a lot more into Islam voting bloc. But then it happens all the time. So what you end up seeing is, or some of the reasons we know this is the case is examples of the Labour MP for Rochdale at the height of the grooming gang scandal said he was explicitly told by the Labour chairman at the time not to discuss the ethnicity of some of the grooming gang perpetrators because it would upset their voters. So what that means is you can't even discuss if there's a racial element to this, which there very clearly was, because if you read some of the witness statements from the grooming gang scandal, again, which many people from London, many ethnic minorities across the country, many liberals would not have done. They just wouldn't have done, because they would be told that the only reason that people talk about the grooming gangs is because of racism, right? But it's like when you actually do look into them, you'll see, young English girls saying, they would quote to us the 4th chapter of the Quran that talks about how you're allowed to beat your wife. Or they would say that they do this to us and not Muslim girls because Muslim girls are their sisters and we're impure kafir, blah, blah, blah. So it's very clear there was that element to it. But no, don't talk about ethnicity, don't talk about religion. Meanwhile, that same Labour Party currently are trying to push through an Islamophobia definition to protect Islam or to protect Muslims, which is so broad, it's ridiculous and only useful for censorship. But there's no Christophobia definition, no Anglophobia definition. There's none of these other definitions, right? So it's very clear there's a selective. And so, I mean, I think the final piece I would say is that I think the people who push this forward also do have a disdain for Britain and its history, and so would love to see it fundamentally change in ways that I think will ultimately be destructive.
Yeah. I saw an article, I think it was this morning it came out, and it was is the Taliban has announced a new law in Afghanistan that says you are legally allowed to beat your wife as long as I can't remember, you're not allowed to break their bones or bruise them, but you're legally allowed to beat your wife. I feel like this whole public political debate around immigration, I feel like people aren't answering each other's questions. People go, there's a grooming gangs problem, we're allowing too many refugees into the UK. And on the other side, they go, well, we should be compassionate towards people who are fleeing their homes. And I feel like those are two very different arguments. And I'm curious how you see that. Because obviously, yes, people are fleeing persecution in different places across the world. That doesn't mean it's the UK's responsibility to take on every single person that comes to the UK in a boat. So how do you, because you obviously talk a lot about like the Greens and what they're talking about in Reform, and now was it Restore UK? How do you see that basically? Because I understand the argument that we should be compassionate, and it is the thing where like if most of there's obviously people on the far right that think all Muslims are a problem, and I think that was Restore's stance, right? That they just want to boot out every single person.
No, so I think that's a caricature of Restore's position. Yeah.
So, right. Okay.
I think from what I've heard, and I've spoken to people who are involved in the campaign, Restore's position would be that all illegal migrants, so all illegal people who've entered the UK illegally, should all be detained and deported, and even people who have been given legal citizenship, if they are not net contributing to the UK. And I think they define that economically, but they'll also have some other aspects as well, then their citizenship should be revoked. I think that's what I've understood from what they've said. And now that's you might disagree with that, but it's clearly not racially based. And my experience with the British people, I live in a predominantly white area. My experience is that the average English person just does not care about the color of your skin so long as you're a decent person. Yeah. And one of my evidences for this is the fact that my kids can run up to anybody's dog. People in the UK love dogs, right? Like people in the UK love dogs. If you go to if you go to Sierra Leone where my grandma's from, the only dogs you'll see are stray dogs. Like no one's got pets. Pet dogs is not a thing. The UK love their dogs. Very protective of their dogs. They'll spend hundreds of pounds on their insurance and blah, blah, blah. And my kids love dogs. Nobody has ever turned my kids away from petting their dogs or having a conversation at all since I've been here. And so the whole, looking out for the racists everywhere, that's just not my experience. And I would argue that that's not actually most people's experiences either, that racial incidences are probably, for minorities, not very common. And I would happily discuss that with anybody. But coming back to the point around Restore Britain's approach is that people don't realize how much the UK has been taken for granted and taken advantage of. There is a much bigger problem than what people think. So there are a lot of people, it's very well, okay, I'll give you an example. Currently, the person who is head of ISIS Somalia was given citizenship in the UK in 2003. I think his name's Abdul Qadir something else. Given citizenship in 2003 in the UK. Went on to preach hate messages against England. When he was then finally targeted by MI5, fled to Somalia. That's when he got his promotion to the head of ISIS in Somalia. His wife is still currently receiving benefits in Slough. right? So first of all, why was this guy allowed into the country to then come on benefits? What, clearly he's not a doctor and a lawyer. Secondly, why did we allow someone into the country who was literally going to recruit people to kill us? And third of all, why is his wife still receiving is there not security concerns there, type of thing? That's obviously an extreme example, but I can tell you dozens of examples of people who are currently receiving benefits in the UK and they live in France. They came from Africa, receiving benefits in the UK, they've moved out, so they're renting out the social housing, for example. There's actually a really big problem where the UK systems and the UK's compassions have been taken for granted, and these things don't grow on trees, right? So essentially, you and I, for example, our taxes are not even going towards building the infrastructure that we want to build. A lot of it is going to servicing the debt from previous generations, many of whom are abusing the system, right? And so our future, when you see the Greens talking about just wanting to tax the rich in order to solve the housing crisis and stuff like that, if you put more money into a broken system, you're not going to get good outcomes. We really need to recognize that the UK has been largely taken for granted. I can name multiple names of people who were either murdered or sexually assaulted by asylum seekers within weeks of them arriving in the UK. So the question many people are asking is, at what point, how much is too much? It's like, if it's clear that we've got people who can turn up on our shores, be housed at taxpayers' expense, and then kill people like Rhiannon White or Wayne Broadhurst, Govinda Jahal, for example, sexually assault 15-year-old girls in Leamington Spa, for instance, or kill army reservists in Swindon, for example, or in the South Coast, for example. At what point do we decide and say the risk of this happening is far too great? We care about our people enough that we're actually going to say no to this? Because what happens is, if you can't even at least ensure that decent, law-abiding people are coming into the country, you can't even ensure that. A lot of people then look at that and say, well, this is a fight for survival, so we need to close the doors completely. That's a very rational and legitimate position. I think that position has been largely mischaracterized by a lot of the liberal politicians and left-leaning politicians. And I think I see part of my opportunity being able to say, I hear that, and trying to help people see that this is a very legitimate and important thing to defend.
How do you then see the obviously the Greens, as from what I'm aware, looking at their manifesto, they just want to open the doors more than Labour's got.
They don't want doors.
Now. No doors. No doors. Take them off the hinges. Who do you think then is the best? Because it does feel I go to America a couple of times a year, and when you watch their news, it does feel like you're watching Star Wars. It's either very left or very right. You've got the blue lightsaber or you've got the red lightsaber, and it feels like that's kind of becoming here now. Do you think that any of the current politicians, whether it's Reform or Restore, or certainly not Labour, but who would you cast your vote to right now? Who do you think's got the best opinion, or are they all slightly off the mark?
I think one of the things we take for granted in the UK is that we've lived in a relatively peaceful country for a long period of time. So many people have grandparents who have connections to the war. Our generation, we've lived in a significant amount of peace. We have really stable institutions, National Health Service. Even before that, parliamentary democracy, we've had that. Schools, a really robust school system. And all of these areas, you can poke holes in them. But these are things that the UK in many ways championed and built and then exported overseas. Like many countries, I mean, even in Africa, there's a study, I can't remember who it was done by, but a study that showed that the parts of Africa that have the highest literacy rates are the parts that had British Christian missionaries stationed there, because they were so motivated to get them reading the Bible that they wanted to teach them how to read, but then also wanted to help them prosper. So they were teaching them how to do maths and stuff like that. And so I say this because all of these things are beautiful and have been built up over time, but none of the foundations of them, obviously except from parliamentary democracy, were originated in government. They were all originated by very entrepreneurial, hardworking British people who, churches that started Sunday schools, and then that became the school system. Churches that started, just charity, and that became the charity industry that we have now. the charity sector, or churches that also started, hospitals and such. And so that became the hospital stuff we have now.
Yeah.
So what that means is that we don't necessarily need government to provide all of the solutions for our problems. I would say what we need our government to do is basically ensure that people can live safely and then get out of the way so that people can, so that people can be entrepreneurial and be creative. I mean, you're an actor, right? So you're able to act and get gigs from the creativity of script writers and production teams and people that put on these amazing things. Sure. And in doing so, that increases your own ability to use your gift and entertain your audiences and such. So my perspective is that I don't look at governments as solutions to our problems. I just look at them as being necessary to provide a safety around us. We need a strong military because we have enemies around the world. We need police as well because sometimes people do bad things. We need some, sure, you can have, basic healthcare and then we've got, basic education system. But really and truly, outside of that, let people be productive, let people be entrepreneurial, let people be creative. So I would always lean towards the more small state, less intervention parties. The Greens want to do everything for everyone. I mean, they would legalize drugs, but make it a criminal offense for you to rent out your flat. Like, what the heck is that about? It's like, I'd rather be renting from a private landlord who cares about his house. In my case, I do. Yeah. Who cares about their house? Because I've lived in social housing. Sure. And I've seen my neighbor downstairs knocking on my door for 6 months, complaining about her leak because the housing association won't come and fix it. I've seen that. Whereas my landlord, he cares about his house, so he wants to take care of it. And I do see parties like Restore and Advance as leaning a lot more towards that. I think the problem with reform that many people are talking about on the right, from what I'm seeing, is that they're becoming a bit too much like the liberal establishment. And so, also that they're not entirely trustworthy. So, for example, a significant number of people around the country support mass deportations. Yeah. A couple of years, maybe a year and a half ago, Nigel Farage kicked out Rupert Lowe from Reform UK because he said he wanted to see mass deportations. Not only did he kick him out, he also basically sent off a witch hunt for him. They made up bogus bullying claims, had police turn up at his door.
What was that whole thing? I could not understand it, about him calling him the Messiah or something.
So basically, I mean, a lot of people's challenges with Nigel Farage is that many people say that he has a Messiah complex where he sees himself as the savior. He is reform is him. So there can be no disagreement with him. If you disagree with him, you're out. Many people who were activists on the ground also spoke about that as well. People in local branches and stuff. Sure. So I don't know about the details of what has happened inside. From the outside, though, I know they accused him of bullying, and they had police turn up at his door. Police confiscated some of his firearms. He's a farmer, so he had firearms. And then it turned out that there was nothing to it, and they dropped the charges basically. Right. All because he said we need mass deportations. But then, fast forward a year and a half later, Reform UK come out with a policy saying they're going to do mass deportations, and that they want to deport millions of illegal migrants who are in the UK, without at least acknowledging that what you said back then, Nigel Farage actually said that was a political impossibility. That itself kind of signals to you a bit of like people pleasing. It's like you're not really moving with conviction. You're just doing what you think is palatable. But then you don't own up to the fact that you were wrong then, and you've been persuaded of this position now. So that's why I think that kind of thing is why you're seeing more parties breaking out on the right, and there's a big debate about what the right should actually be advocating for. I mean, for many people, the Conservatives are not even really right-leaning. They're just part of like the uni party. The Conservatives gave us the highest. They gave us the highest taxes. They gave us the biggest DEI agendas in civil service and in government. They gave us the highest immigration levels. So they didn't conserve anything at all, except for money for their mates with like the test and trace scheme and all that ridiculous stuff.
Yeah, biggest upward wealth transfer in history was COVID, and we're still not talking about that, and all the things everyone's blaming it on Brexit, but it was actually COVID is horrible. The way I see what's happening now with the Greens is the same thing that I saw a couple of years ago happening with Labour. It feels like everyone's falling into the same trap. I think that's the media. I think it's really difficult to, I was reading the other day, because I follow American politics quite heavily, and there's all this stuff about, I don't know how much you follow it, but RFK, in the US doing there's a big talk about glyphosate at the moment because he's always hated glyphosate in farming and agriculture. And basically Trump has turned around and said, oh, actually, we're going to push more glyphosate in agriculture. And so every single newspaper, if you Google RFK glyphosate, everyone goes, oh, he's changed his stance. He's 180'd. He doesn't care about what he's talked about for 10, 15 years. And you go on his Twitter page, his X, and the top post is him saying, I do not agree with this. I will do whatever I can to U-turn this decision. But I feel like everyone's just in an echo chamber. And I feel like that happened with Labour the first time. My mother-in-law read the Keir Starmer, it wasn't an autobiography, but his biography. I can't remember what it was called. And I read it and I was like, oh, he actually sounds like a decent guy. I don't really trust him. And there's loads of reasons not to believe in them. And there was I always point people to the Al Jazeera documentary. It was called The Labour Files. And it shows how Labour, Friends of Israel, is the biggest supporter of Labour. And Labour actually gets more money from large Israeli donors than anyone else, and nobody sees that connection with everything that's happening now. And it does feel like we're just falling into the same trap of every single person I know is like, oh, Zach Polanski, the Greens, they're going to do it. They're going to fix it. They're going to fix climate change. They're going to fix the immigration problem. And I feel like we're just falling into the exact same trap we were before. And now everyone hates Keir Starmer. And I'm not surprised. I was like, we knew. I mean, we didn't know he was getting, glasses and pajamas for 150,000
that his wife was getting £20,000 for dresses.
Yeah. I just don't understand it because every single video that you put out is the Greens are just making fools of themselves on the news, and I don't really. How do you see that? Do you pay a lot of attention to the media, or where do you get your information from as well?
Yeah, I think you're so right about falling into the same trap, and I think it's because people focus a bit too much on individuals and not on structures and environments. So if you think about it, why is it that the Labour Party? Okay, let's even say, okay, so some people say what you just said is anti-Semitic because you're talking about Friends of Israel and blah blah blah, and I'm not too interested in that. But let's say, for argument's sake, that what you said was true, and it proves that Israel have a significant influence on the British government and our conversations in the UK. Why are they allowed to have that level of influence? If that was true. The reason for it is that there are structures and incentives for politicians and MPs who have a lot of power and can manipulate a lot of things, especially in cabinet. So why wouldn't you go and try and lobby, right? Like, why wouldn't you, if you were an interest group, why wouldn't you want to make sure Keir Starmer's wife is wearing nice dresses because that he can play and stuff. That's what happens all the time. When government has so much power and so much control, lobbying and interest groups happen. Whereas if, for example, you had a system where not only is the government responsible for fewer things because they trust their citizens to get on with the job, but MPs, you can't be a lifelong MP. I think in the current cabinet, none of them have run a business before. David Lammy, Rachel Reeves, not like Keir Starmer, they haven't run businesses before. What do they know about business legislation? What do they know about creating a growth environment? They know nothing, but they're career politicians. And you could say the same thing in the Conservative Party. You could possibly say a similar thing in Reform and other parties. Sure, fine. But if you have a system where, you can be a career politician, then of course you're going to fill up your black book because you want the favors and stuff. Now, what the Greens are offering, if we're talking about them specifically, is actually no different because they want to give the government even more control. So they want, for example, more social housing managed by the government. They want the government to have more involvement in farming and agriculture, in climate, in energy, in these sectors. And so what's going to happen? You're going to have more lobbying and interest groups. It's just going to look different. And some people may think that Zach Polanski is so moral and virtuous that people can wave millions of pounds at him to increase the green energy levies, that increase the tax we pay on our energy bills to fund or subsidize the climate sector. And he's so virtuous and so moral, he'll turn down 100 grand. Fine. But you're making the same mistake that everybody else has made before of trying to put too much trust in people who are in a structure that is built for lobbying. Whereas if you had a smaller government, one that said, look, we manage these few things. We manage defense, we manage policing, we manage health, but we're happy to reduce the elements that we're involved in things like health and stuff because we waste so much money on these things. We waste so much money. Then at least you're less likely to have as much influence. When people look too much at the individuals and not the structures behind them, They make these mistakes. And I think, again, for a lot of people, they've been taught slogans and stuff like that. So for many people, capitalism equals bad, it equals greed, it equals so on and so forth. But if we're actually talking about what capitalism should be an environment where there's just limited regulation so that individuals can freely trade. And if you don't like what that company is doing, you go and look for another company. That company eventually realizes, hey, if we want to keep our customers, we need to treat people better. If we want to keep our staff, we treat people better. That, I think, is the way that Britain saw most of its growth historically, through like the Industrial Revolution. And even towns like, there are whole sections of Birmingham, for example. You've got communities like Bourneville. Have you ever been to Bourneville? Bourneville was where the Cadbury factory was. That whole town is full of terraced houses because as Cadbury's were making loads of money, they wanted to house their staff near the factories. They built loads of houses for their staff. And now you have a whole town and community that's come out of it. That's the kind of thing that capitalism can provide. And I see everything that the Greens talk about killing all of that by promising this utopia that they will not be able to achieve.
I know. It's like nobody goes and reads the source material. Everyone sees the Instagram videos of Zach Polanski walking around in a nice jacket on a sunny day, telling everyone all the good things he's going to do. And then you go and read. I was like, just read the manifesto. It feels like a Christmas wish list, which is why, again, I keep saying it feels like what Labour said they were going to do, because they're like, we're going to do all of these things and we're going to put together the public sector and the private sector to make it happen. They don't have any money, and that's a lot to do with COVID and what the Tories did during COVID. But nonetheless, they don't have any money, and now we've got all these immigrants coming in, and there's all the. I'm actually, I'll direct it towards that because there is a big debate, and I fully don't understand it myself. A lot of people say that immigrants do get benefits, and you spoke to it a little bit there, but I would like to hear a little bit more about it. Some people say they do, some people say they don't. There's all this talk about them getting hotels, but obviously hotels isn't the major thing. Like there's housing, and I know that there's a whole problem. There was it Clear Springs who they outsourced to, and there's like hundreds of millions of pounds going to these companies outside of the government. That it's just a black hole. So immigrants are living in public housing that's falling apart, and who knows where that money is going as well. There is a big debate, and I don't feel like I fully know the answer. When you talk about immigrants getting benefits, is it NHS? Is it more than that? What sorts of things are refugees getting?
Oh, there's loads. There's loads. So and there are different levels to it. So I think there's also different problems that you've highlighted. What often ends up happening is people might be talking about one problem, and somebody will say that's not as big of a problem as this. That doesn't mean it's not a big problem. It's a huge problem. So in the case of asylum hotels, this is a huge problem. You can jump on a dinghy in France, which is a safe country. If you've come from Afghanistan, you've traveled through at least 13 different countries, most of whom I'm sure pretty sure all of them are safe countries. So they're not coming to France and then making that final trip over the waters into the UK because of fear for their life or love for Britain, right? There's something else that must be pulling them. The two things that are pulling them, one is that as soon as they touch British waters, they're going to be basically ushered into the UK by one of our own boats, which is itself is crazy. But secondly, they'll be housed when they come in. So they will be housed in these hotels. So like, that's when people talk about the asylum hotels. That is the system. It's like they're brought into the UK. Yeah. Sometimes they just make their own way. But, we're an island. So it's not hard to know when the boats are coming through. I mean, we could stop the Germans from invading, right? So we could stop these boats if we wanted to. So they come in, they're housed in the hotels. And that costs, I think numbers vary from £6 billion or £6 million a day, I think I've been told, to house people in these hotels. Right. That money is often going to private contractors, right? So your Premier Inns and stuff like that. So you can see the perverse incentives there. Obviously, the chief execs of these companies that have struggled to fill their rooms since COVID, they love it. So they're obviously going to campaign for this to happen. And then when that happens, that's one thing. So yes, it's true that those people are often not allowed access to all of the services that are available, but they are still given a bit of an allowance. And there are videos about the kind of food that some of these people have in their hotels. They're given 3 courses a day, right? So they're given food daily. So just imagine, if you're an ex-vet and you're in the street and you're homeless, you're not getting 3 meals a day in a hotel, right? But then somebody who broke into the country can get 3 meals in a day. So that alone is already a problem, and why a lot of people are angry. Yeah. The other aspect of the benefit system is when we're talking about legal migration. And this is, I think, a bigger problem in terms of it's a bigger problem in terms of the scale of it. Obviously, another part of the problem with the asylum stuff is that you don't know who's coming into the country. So we have had, people linked to terror groups coming in and in our hotels.
Yeah.
On the legal migration piece, it's absolutely true that over the past couple of decades, especially since Tony Blair had come into power, that loads of migrants who have literally just touched the UK have been given access to so much in benefits. I know people personally who... I know people personally. This is how crazy it is, okay? And I'm pretty sure a lot of people who listen to this will resonate with this as well, especially in London. I know loads of people who came to the UK. They're currently living in the UK as a migrant. They are in a council house that maybe they got about 10, 15 years ago when it was easier to get council housing than now. And in many cases, if they're married, they know that they get more money if they say that they're not married. So they don't declare their spouse as someone in their tenancy agreement. Usually it's the woman that claims it because women will get more money than men, especially if they have a child. So you'll have women who are married saying that they're not married so they can get more benefit money and not working because it's enough to keep them going. You've got a house plus you got a few hundred quid per month, not working. That's a big problem. I know that's happening. I see it happening. And often, when their kids get to 18, or so, they know that the benefit money might change. So that's when they start to look for work. But they've already been scrounging for decades, right? Like this kind of thing does happen. I mentioned to you before, people who live in other countries and claim benefits here and have given that social housing to their children who are not meant to be, on that tenancy agreement. So they're off working somewhere else, making money, scrounging off for the taxpayer here. These kind of things, they happen. And because a lot of people, I think because it takes a sledgehammer and it smashes a lot of the narratives that people have been taught, they don't believe it. But because I've seen this stuff happening, I'm really trying to wake people up to how much we're being taken advantage of as a country. So when people say, my perspective is we're not obligated to welcome asylum seekers into the UK. We're not obligated to do that. That's not the only way to be compassionate. That can be something done out of compassion, but it's completely compassionate to say we want to limit the burden that we place on our citizens and be compassionate to them. We're unable to extend this offer to other people. That's a legitimate thing to say. I mean, you're perfectly entitled to say, hey, I'm not able to donate money to this charity this month because I want to, get my partner something nice. Does that mean that you're a selfish guy because you've made that decision? Of course not. You just chosen that this is your capacity, but it takes a sledgehammer to what people hold dear. So when we talk about migration crisis, especially on the legal migration side, even the Islamic Council for Britain and there's another Muslim national organization, I can't remember which one, they estimate that 50% of British Muslims are on benefits or live in poverty. Right. Sorry. I already mentioned to you that 78% of Somalians live in social housing, for example. Even 50% of black people, I think, either in London or in the UK, are in poverty. These are all communities that would not have been here en masse 60 years ago. So there is a large number of people from migrant backgrounds who are living off of the welfare state. And that means that they are not the doctors and the lawyers and the engineers that are paying loads in tax. And what I would love to see is us having a system where we're encouraging and drawing people who see the UK, yes, as a land of opportunity, but not as just something to be drained, something to actually contribute to, something to value. And that's what ultimately the British people would embrace. Because I think Britain historically is not a country that is big on racial grievances and things as a whole. You've obviously had some times where racialized politics have played more of an impact. But generally speaking, English people are chill, man. Like British people are really chill, really welcoming, much more welcoming than other parts of the world.
Yeah, you've got a really good analogy. It's the best I've ever heard, which is people say it's racist that Britain is better, for example, than Afghanistan or Somalia, these countries that people are coming from, but they are coming here because it is a better life here. It's that's about as black and white as it gets.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I give you an example. So when I was younger, I started to ask questions about how I got here. Like, why am I in the UK? Why did my parents come over here when they did? What was going on in their country of origin? All that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I talked to my dad about it and I asked him why he came to the UK. He came to the UK because in the 1980s, Nigeria, their government made some policy changes and it significantly devalued the naira. So that's why he came. My mum came because she wanted to improve her education, and the UK had a much better education system than most of the parts around the world. So they came to the UK because they saw it as a land of opportunity and they wanted to build. Okay. There are many people who, when you're having a migration debate, they'll say, it's a very common slogan, I'll hear it, they'll say, we're here because you were there first. So their argument is that they had to come to England because England or Britain went over to their places, colonized it, pillaged it and stuff. And so they had no choice but to come over here. And it's like, make this make sense. You mean to tell me that people willingly left their countries of origin to come to the evil, oppressive, colonial country that raped and pillaged them for decades? Willingly. Like that's what they did. And were able to work and study and learn and buy and sell in that country. But that country is evil, racist, and oppressive. Make it make sense. You know? I think 54 of the countries in the Commonwealth were former colonies, and 2 of them weren't former colonies, and they joined willingly. So it's like...
Which, do you know which 2?
I think I want to say... No, I don't. Not off the top of my head, but I looked at this in my previous video. I think Rwanda might be one of them. I can't say for certain. But the point is, you know, if this country is so horrible and we need to keep on bending over backwards to prove that we're not horrible, what's really going to happen is hostile forces are going to take advantage of it. You know, and that's what we're seeing that with the rise of Islamism in the UK. We're seeing that with the migration crisis that we're facing in the UK. And a lot of it is really just suicidal empathy.
Yeah, I do. So I'm not Christian myself. I did grow up Christian, but I would say that I don't have a religion that I adhere to now. But I'm fascinated by this idea that we have the laws and sort of rules and particularly morals that we abide by because we are in a nation that grew up with those values. Generally, the West grew up with Christian morality. It's such a fascinating thing because people get quite upset about that, particularly people on the left who might not have a religion, and they go, "No, I'm not secretly Christian. I don't secretly believe in God subconsciously. What are you talking about?" And it's like, no, but like, why do you think it's bad to kill people, for example? Because other people might not see that as such a bad idea, or you know, whatever you want to call it, whichever. I'm fascinated by this idea that though I am not Christian, I don't necessarily go to church on a Sunday and believe in God. We have our morals because of a Christian background. I'm curious how you see that. You're talking about Islamism sort of making its way over here, and people talking about the fact that like that doesn't really gel as well, particularly when it's maybe taking over, when it's taking a majority here. Is there any way that we can see a way through this in a positive light? Because there are also, like, again, I know people who are like, the Quran says it's okay to kill people. And I'm like, yeah, but Islam is one of the biggest religions in the world. It's not like every single Muslim person is going around doing these things. There's obviously good people and there's extremists. And do you think there's a way out of this situation where we can live in a diverse Britain that's maybe not politicized? Or do you think that we need to revert to strictly Christian values in the country?
It's an incredible question, but there's so many there's so many layers to it because there are multiple questions. Which one do you want me to tackle first?
Whichever one you remember. I've been known to ask about 12 questions.
Do you know, it's funny you say that because actually, what I've got here, this is my favorite hat. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah. I've seen you wearing it. Yeah.
In fact, I'm gonna put it on now.
Go for it.
Why not? I thought, do you know what? If I've had kind of mixed thoughts about this hat because it feels a bit Trumpian, and I'm not like a Trump stan boy, but I just figured, you know what? It's the one I've got. Let me go for it. But yes, I mean, I'll take the first question around people realizing that Britain is historically and foundationally a Christian country. I think Tom Holland says in his book Dominion that Christianity is like the water that we swim in. It's like all around us. So even if you personally...
Is this Tom Holland?
No,
the actor?
sorry, Tom Holland is a historian. So it is a different historian.
Okay,
that would be something, right? No, so yeah, different Tom Holland in a book Dominion talks about this. Right. And if you just think about it, what's the flag of England? St. George's Cross. What do you see on all the hospitals? You see a cross. The flags of Great Britain are just a combination of the different crosses that we have. Even the word charity for charity sector is from the Bible. The word translated as love is charis in Greek, or I think gift actually, charis in Greek. So again, that comes from the Bible, and so I think more people are realizing that Christianity has shaped this country, and being a Christian, looking more into the history of Christianity in this country, I even see that as well and come to appreciate it a lot more. And I think those kind of things are really easy to see when you think about just things like, we have this idea that you shouldn't kill somebody for what they believe, for example. Whereas in countries like Afghanistan, 99% of people, or I think 79% of people believe that the penalty for blasphemy should be the death penalty. Pakistan had recently convicted two students of blasphemy, and have sentenced them to death. I'm not sure if they've been executed yet, but in 2025 that took place. The last execution in the UK for blasphemy was in the 1600s. And it wasn't liberal progressives that outlawed it. It was Protestant Christians who said, wait, no, we shouldn't be doing this. Like, we should be able to debate and reason, but we shouldn't be putting people to death for this kind of stuff. So I think the more people see the cultures mixing, people realize that a lot of what we value, even the idea that the weak should look after, or the weak should be looked after by the strong, that wasn't a Roman idea, right? Like the Romans, for example, were very much about power and dominion and strength. That's why they had their emperors in that way. Why is it that we look after our weak ones? Well, it's because of what the scriptures say about looking after the widows and looking after the orphaned. Why do we have parliamentary democracy? It's because the people who were forming our government were Christians that believed that no human is above God's law, and that the sovereign of our nation is still under God's law, not someone who can just make laws arbitrarily. So, the Magna Carta, which talks about these kind of things and says that, our monarch is not above the law, was a British invention that we then exported around the world, which came from people who were convinced of the Bible's truth. Even the abolition of slavery, person, William Wilberforce, who really pushed forward the UK's abolition of slavery, he wasn't a progressive liberal. He was a conservative Christian who said the slave trade is anti-Christian. It's anti-biblical. I know many people respond and say, oh, but the Bible, promotes or the Bible condones slavery. It's a very, common response. And I think two things that need to be considered. One is that slavery is something that's taken place in every civilization in history. If you type in any country, slave trade, something will come up. Whether you type in Pakistan slave trade or Arabian slave trade, slavery still takes place largely in Libya and across some of the Arab and African countries today.
It's a big thing in Asia right now. I was seeing something the other day. I can't remember which country. It's really bad for the shrimp trade in Asia, where they send people out on boats. They send men out on boats to fish for shrimp, and they're out there for 10 years, and supposedly they're going to bring them back. It's still a problem around the world today.
And when you look at slavery in the Bible, the kind of slavery that you see, human trafficking is a capital offense in the Old Testament. So the fact that was taking place is what William Wilberforce would have looked at and said, no, the Bible prohibits this kind of thing. And so people may have sold themselves into slavery to pay off debts, or they may have been captured in war. And if you've captured someone in war, how do you make sure that there's not civil unrest in the community? You haven't got these massive prisons that we have today. So, indentured servitude was one of the things that they would use. William Wilberforce pushes forward this campaign. Now, other countries had abolished slavery in those countries beforehand, like Haiti and I think Denmark had abolished slavery in their countries. But none of them spent their time, money, technology, and the lives of their citizens to abolish slavery around the world. So Britain, through the West Africa Squadron, or very shortly after we defeated Napoleon in the Napoleonic Wars, one of the aspects of the treaty that we had with them is that no more slave trade. We pulled Spain, countries like Spain and Portugal that had been importing slaves for hundreds of years. We got them to agree to abolish slavery as well. Then the West Africa Squadron was a part of the Britain's Navy that literally was patrolling the seas to capture slave ships so that they could free slaves.
Wow, right.
At one point, over the course of 60 years, the West Africa Squadron freed 150,000 slaves. And for every 9 slaves that were freed, 1 British soldier died. or Navy man died. No other country in history had paid with its own blood to free slaves. And these things came from a Christian conviction that this is wrong. I'm not saying that, we should ignore the fact that they engaged in slavery. What I'm highlighting is that you can't just talk about one aspect of Christianity's impact in Britain and Britain's impact in the world and not talk about the incredible sacrifice that also came. My grandma's from Sierra Leone. The capital is called Freetown because that's where they returned freed slaves so they could live, right?
Right.
So, yes, we need to be able to look back at our British and Christian heritage and celebrate these kinds of things. In answer to your other question around the possibility for cohesion, basically, it really is really important to understand that not all cultures and not all beliefs are the same. So I think for many secular people who would consider themselves quite secular, non-religious, and also quite liberal, quite tolerant of all people, and they see people as individuals and stuff like that. There's obviously more to liberalism than that, but just to keep it simple, there is this idea that all religions are basically the same. I've spoken to people who have said, Islam and religion and Christianity, it's all the same. It's basically, love your neighbor and it's all fine.
I mean, although they're the same source material, I don't really find that to be the case.
And when you look at,
continue.
not only when you look at the source material, when you also actually take those religions for what they claim to be about, you realize it's clearly not true. And it is also quite disrespectful as well, because you then flatten the ground on all of them. There is a reason that in the Quran, for example, there's a passage that talks about something called the jizya. Are you familiar with that?
Right.
So the jizya is a tax that when Islam becomes the dominant religion of the land, for Christians and Jews who refuse to become Muslims, the only way they're allowed to live in that land is if they pay the jizya tax. Basically as a way of them saying, we'll allow you to stay, but you need to pay us for that privilege. Right, what if you're not Jewish or Christian? There's no space for you. So it's like we talk about two-tier policing and two-tier stuff. It's like that's two-tier taxation, right? So somebody would say, well, not every Muslim believes that. And that may be well and true, but there is a significantly growing number of people, of Muslims in the UK, who do want to see what they call a Muslim caliphate, basically a state that is part of the global Muslim brotherhood led by a Muslim ruler. There's a growing number, over 50% of the mosques in the UK are connected to a Muslim organization called the Tablighi Jamaat. That is like the evangelistic arm of the Deobandi movement, which was a Muslim movement that came out of British India when they were a colony, and it was an anti-British movement. They are a sect of Muslims who believe that the Prophet Muhammad is the most exemplary man that's ever lived. They want to see a Muslim caliphate established in the UK, and they are connected to 50% of the mosque in the UK. So that means that 50% of the mosques in the UK are being led by people who believe this and are teaching it to their congregants. So as the number of Muslims in the UK grows, that brand of Islam, which is already quite big in the UK, will continue to grow. So there's no surprise that there's certain behaviors that they seem to condone, like very young brides. At the moment, the country that is the biggest, top of the leaderboard right now for forced marriages are countries that involve people from Pakistan. And you can see this on the Home Office website as well. So this is well-known data. We're not good at capturing data in a lot of these things because it's very uncomfortable, but that's something that you can see, right? So these kind of things will continue to grow. Then obviously the third problem I see, so there's the freedom, there's the lifestyle. The third problem I see, obviously from a Christian perspective, is that this is a false religion. And I think it's very easily false as well, because the Quran talks about how you can know the Quran is true by comparing it to previous revelations. And they say that the Bible or the gospel and the Torah are previous revelations of God. But then when you look at those previous revelations, they very clearly contradict what the Quran says. The Quran says that Jesus Christ wasn't even crucified. They don't just say he didn't rise again. They say he was never even crucified. But the Gospels say that he was crucified. So there's a clear contradiction. Now, how do they deal with that? Well, one, they say, the Bible must have been corrupted. But then the question is, if the Bible is corrupted, why does the Quran say that you should go to it to confirm what's in the Quran? So it's corrupted.
Right.
It's
So
very
then
clearly
what's
false.
the difference? Yeah, what's the difference then between like that and say Judaism, which is just Christianity without the New Testament, essentially? Like why can Jews live here so peacefully and freely, and why can most Muslims live here so peacefully and freely? Why is that their extremist sect, which seems to create so many problems?
So there's a couple of answers to that. The first, I mean, if I told you that somebody took a knife and strapped themselves with some bombs and went to a religious center, a religious building, you already have an idea what religion you think they're coming from and the religions that they're probably targeting. The reality is that it's just not, I mean, people may talk about Jewish influence in UK government and stuff, but we're not seeing a significant number of Jews attacking Muslims and Christians. So for one, that's already an issue. It might be true that the majority of Muslims are not doing this. And I don't think there are many people who make this argument. I think the argument, or what people are highlighting, is that if you have a growing number of people in the UK that are prone to extreme life-ending actions, then you really need to limit the number of people coming in that share that ideology. I think that's quite clear because...
Or at least screen, because when you've got the people coming in on the boats, you're not screening them. And then we're talking about legal immigration as opposed to illegal immigration.
And so, I mean, yes, the problem is not just about the number of people. It's also about the degree to which the small number will go to. So you think, for example, Manchester Arena attack. It's huge, you know? You think about Lee Rigby all those years ago. Huge, right? You think about the recent Manchester synagogue attack. Huge.
I was in London the day that they had those attacks on the different bridges. I was staying in a little B&B right next to Borough Market, and I'd actually gone to the theatre. And I was in the theatre for like a 4-hour show. And my family was texting me because I wasn't responding to their messages, and I'd actually moved to a different B&B. So I came out of the play. I can't remember what it is that I saw, and saw that those attacks had just happened. So it's almost a first-hand thing. But you're right; it does spring a particular image to mind of what that person looks like.
No, it's perfectly fine. And of course, that is not random. There are passages in the Quran that many Muslims look at as justification for these acts. So there's that. Then there's two other things as well. The second thing is that amongst a lot of the Muslim community globally, not just in the UK, they have a very deep affinity towards each other. They potentially protect each other as part of the global ummah, is what they would say. So when a lot of these things happen, they feel it. Many of the people who don't condone that behavior feel a tension. Like, can I, rat them out to prevent, or to MI5 or to the police when I'm going against my Muslim brother, my Muslim sister? And this is one of the reasons why the grooming gang scandal, where who knows how many tens of thousands of young English girls were raped and trafficked. Never know. Yeah. This is why one of the reasons it's able to go on as long as it has is because people cover it up and they don't want to feel like they're siding with the white man over their Muslim brother. The third piece is that we do create an environment that seems to incentivize and encourage this kind of behavior. Because if you're telling people that, hey, we'll happily turn a blind eye as long as you give us your votes, we'll happily turn a blind eye as long as you prove that our liberal vision for a society where all faiths are treated equally can thrive, we'll turn a blind eye to these things, then people feel more empowered and emboldened to do it. Like, we talked before about Labour building or having an Islamophobia definition that they're working on, right? So this conversation, based on their current guidance, they say Islamophobia is anything that is harmful towards Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. So if that was made legal and then you publish this discussion, somebody could have you charged for Islamophobia, right? If that became a working definition. So that means that we can't even have a conversation about the extremists and distinguish them from the moderate Muslims, because even that would be covered up. So if you create that kind of environment where you clamp down on people who criticize and call out these things, not only will you incentivize that behavior because people are like, hey, I can get away with it, you'll also anger the general population who are scared and feel threatened by this, and then tensions will rise. So I actually think that us talking about this kind of stuff is really important for people to see another way. Because if it seems like you've got no options and we're going to keep getting used to terror attack after terror attack, every couple of months or so, we just have to get used to a terror attack and accept it as a way of life. Then eventually people are like, no.
Yeah. I've not seen anything. There must be some movement, some Islam movement against this. I feel like there's like we said, like the majority of Muslim people are not violent people, obviously. Otherwise we'd be living in a hellhole, because there's too many people here. If every single person was violent, if every single Christian person was violent, whatever you want to call it, why is there not, maybe I'm mistaken, maybe there is, why is there not some massive movement on behalf of people who disagree with this extremism from
I'm sure you could find I'm sure you could find loads of imams and different community groups that speak out against extremism. I'm sure you could find that. But the trouble is, it's not really on that level. So I know I spoke beforehand about government policy and how governments need to step out a bit rather than intervene too much so that we can thrive. In this area of national security, this is a governmental thing. And we've had a government who's continued to encourage more of it rather than deal with it. So I wouldn't put too much onus on Muslims to be speaking out against it, because the reality is,
no, it's not. I wouldn't say there's still responsibility, but I'm fascinated that there's not currently a movement that I can think of off the top of my head to speak out against. I mean,
there's not one that I can think of that has like national brand recognition, but even still, it's like whether they did or didn't doesn't really matter, because I'm not expecting them to be able to persuade young men who probably have daddy issues, quite angry, that get radicalized by a preacher who says, hey, look, these white people, they hate you and they disrespect your prophet and they want to burn the Quran and they disrespect you, and you need to defend Allah's honor and help us establish a Muslim country. I'm not expecting, the community groups to put out a statement that's really going to deter people like that. What I'm expecting is for our government to stop subsidizing it. A lot of these people are on benefits. So just removing, this is why a lot of people say migrants should not receive state benefits. And if that was the case, a lot of this problem would go, because these people would have to find work. First of all, how many people that think this way and behave this way are actually going to be able to find good quality work? Many of them would go. Many of and so you would then have communities that have to be productive and contribute. You'd have less of this problem. Then, we currently 75% of MI5's counter-terrorism caseload is to deal with Islam, radical Islam, right? Many of them are dual citizens. Why are they here?
Right.
If we have to monitor you to make sure you're not going to blow us up, it's like, you also have citizenship somewhere else. Why are you here? So I think if government really steps up and says, we're going to deal with this issue, the issue goes. Yeah. The issue largely goes. And whatever's left becomes far more manageable.
Sure. Does it not? Because say we de-incentivized certain councils, because I know you've spoken about that as well, councils getting money depending on how many immigrants they take into their community and put in housing. If you de-incentivize people from coming here and you stop giving them benefits, would it not turn into something like, I know there was that, it's not really a thing anymore, but it was a thing a few years ago in France. Was it called the Jungle or something like that in the north of France, where they built up that big shanty town of immigrants? There was a play I saw about it, and it was sort of just this place that they kind of left. It was this wasteland in the north of France where people were living, and then eventually they'd make their way across here. Do you not think people would just stay here and, sleep in tents outside? Do you think people would leave the country? Or because they can't, if they need to go look for work, they can't necessarily find work. So do you think people would just leave the UK and go to another European country that would accept them? Or do you think it would lead towards mass deportations?
Well, I think that part of that assumes that the majority of people here have no other alternative and would choose to live in those kind of conditions rather than go back. I'm not familiar with what happened in France, but I do know that a lot of people who are currently on benefits in the UK plan to go back to their countries of origin anyway. Like a lot of Africans plan to build a house in their country of origin. They're here to work, and then when they retire, they're gone. It's a very, very big thing. So there'll be a lot of people who wouldn't need to stay in those circumstances because they do have other options. And that's one of the things that the Green Party, for example, fails to see, that a lot of migrants here are just economic migrants. They're not fleeing war and devastation. They just wanted to make more money here. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect, though, is that if there are people I think everybody should be given opportunities, but what you do with those opportunities is up to you. So if people are here, people come here and the numbers are manageable and people have been screened well, like you've said, then opportunities to work should be given to them. But that doesn't mean that those people have the right to remain if they continue to pose a threat to this country. So if somebody has, and again, I think one of the reasons why the conversation gets muddy is because when I talk about this, for example, I think there are a lot of people in the UK who are dual citizens and they should have their UK citizenship stripped. Many people hear that and think that's really unfair, it's arbitrary, and if a white person was to say it, they'll think it's race-based. What I would then say is, if somebody is on the terrorism watch list and has dual citizenship, it makes sense to remove their UK citizenship so they're at least not a threat to us in the UK, right?
Yeah.
That is a very legitimate thing to do, isn't it? Because again, we talk about your house. If you had somebody in your house who wasn't your partner, wasn't your child, wasn't your friend, wasn't your family, but they just came in, and you're constantly watching them thinking, I hope they don't, I hope they don't attack me. I hope they don't attack my partner.
It's
You're
a
not
great
gonna keep
analogy. Would you open your doors to strangers outside?
Right?
To all
Knowing that they have a house next door or house down the road, would you keep them in your house and watch them, or would you say, go home? Right?
Yeah. Fully. Are there a lot of people who are in the UK on the terrorism watch list?
Like I said, 75% of the terror watch list. The numbers are definitely in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of people on the terror watch list. Many of them, especially many of the Muslims, have dual citizenship. So many of them have another country that they could go to. And then, of course, all of them, the majority of Muslims in this country their grandparents were not born here. So in the case of Shamima Begum, for example, her parents were given citizenship in the UK, and she was born as a UK citizen, right? She then obviously went on to go and do what she did and had her citizenship revoked. Now, many people look at that as a travesty, but then I'm thinking, if you can't even protect yourself from people like that who would go and join your enemies and try and plot against you, then you cannot protect your country. Nobody is saying that. I've not heard. There are some people, let me not lie, there are some people who I know will have a total remigration approach where they're just like, if you're not 99% Anglo-Saxon ethnicity, then you have to go.
Of course.
And
those people are there,
like
obviously.
the Steve Laws and stuff, like they're there. And that is such a minority position. And I think even he knows that really and truly, all he's doing is trying to push the Overton window quite far. I don't think he genuinely believes that would even be achieved, nor that the majority of English people would want, or British people would want that. Because again, from my experience, Brits are not that racially sectarian, where they're like, oh, just because you're black, you can't be here. Generally, it's like, if you're here and you're chill and you're cool and we get along and stuff, then we quite like a bit of diversity, a bit of racial, ethnic diversity and stuff, generally speaking. But you need to be able to protect yourself, and that and the needs of the country need to come before the needs of the international community, or the restrictions of the global supranational bodies. Like we had a case where there was an asylum seeker who came into the UK, and he was fleeing France because he'd been charged of sexual assault in France. Came to the UK. Right. His deportation back to France so that they could try him, not back to his country of origin, back to France so that he could be tried. His deportation was blocked by the ECHR on the grounds that he would be held in a cell in France that was too small.
I feel like we're prioritizing all the wrong things.
It's like, why are we prioritizing the interests of the luxuries of foreign criminals over the safety of British citizens? I think that's really the big problem that many Brits face, and what our political establishment and our media fail to see. And I think a lot of people, maybe from the kind of circles that we've come from, London, creative scene, that kind of thing, wouldn't hear because it smashes some of the ideas that they've been told to have.
And like you say, like we were talking about the Greens earlier and them sort of blowing the doors off their hinges.
And it's the same mistake that people like Zach Polanski make. I don't know if you saw him on Question Time recently or the last time he was on it, where he made a comment. He said, people complain about immigration. I don't know about you, but I don't like to wipe anybody's bums. So if we don't have these immigrants, who's going to wipe our bums when we're older? Talking about care sector and that kind of thing.
Yeah, of course.
So what does that show you his perspective of migrants is? Slave labor, bum wipers, right?
Yeah.
But these are the tolerant, compassionate ones.
Yeah, I guess I would say, well, if I haven't seen that clip, but if I had, I would say that harkens back to the fact that people always throw out that the NHS was put together, it was built by immigrants, which is true, but it's nonetheless irrelevant to the discussion.
Is it true though?
You can be proud. From what I understand, yeah, because it was built just after World War II, and from what I understand, Britain imported a lot of immigrants, and then you get like the Windrush generation, which helped to genuinely build and become nurses and doctors in the NHS. It doesn't. It's a great, like, beautiful piece of information. It doesn't change the fact that what we're going through now has nothing to do with that.
But what it does do is it kind of reinforces this idea that unless we keep our doors open, we'll be hopeless. Which isn't true, because there's a difference between someone building something and someone helping to build something, or someone being invited to build something. There's a big difference. Yeah. Like, essentially, and I think that's the important thing that needs to be clarified. So even now, today, for instance, the fact that we have, people will say the NHS would not survive without migration. And I think if that's true, if you look at the NHS running as it currently is, that assumes it has to run the way that it currently does. As a country, we are more like, we import doctors whilst also having a cap on the number of medical students we train per year. So it's not like we've got the most number. I mean, medical school is one of the most competitive things that you can apply for. I think some universities have an acceptance rate of like 1 to 300 applicants, something like that. It's crazy competitive. But we cap the number of doctors that we train. Why? Because we're currently relying a very bureaucratic and government-driven medical system or university system where they decide, okay, it's cheaper for us to hire people from overseas than it is for us to train up our own staff. So we actually have a self-imposed problem where we're relying more on foreign labor than we're relying on UK homegrown talent to run our NHS. So we can't run it without migrants by choice, not by force or by need. And the problem that then arises is people from around the world know this. And so often you'll have, I mean, I think the BMA, the British Medical Association, talked about some of the standards that foreign doctors have to pass to be able to practice here. And the standards are lower than what British doctors have to go through. So there's an unfair incentive there. Boris Johnson opened up loads of health and social care visas to come and work in the care sector a number of years ago when he was in power. And I know personally people who never, ever worked a day of their life in health and social care who are now in the UK on a health and social care visa.
How did they get in then?
On the health and social care visa.
Well, just what, like lie on the application? Yeah.
And you know, somebody rocks up and says, "Hey, they've got these new visas. I can help you do your application." And then there was also a case in I want to say 2022, I think, of a business that was investigated. It was meant to be an agency for health and social care workers, and it turned out this agency had managed to process over 1,000 health and social care visa, not the visa applications, because that's done by the Home Office, but that's it. They said they employed 1,000 health and social care workers as an agency for other institutions. When that company was investigated, they had no office, 2 members of staff, and it was just a fake company. So these people came on the visas and then just disappeared into the country somewhere. And now they're probably delivering on Uber or Deliveroo. So I don't know if have you ever ordered from Deliveroo or Uber Eats, and the person that's meant to come is not the person that comes to the door?
I don't know. I don't use it that often, but is that a big problem?
Like, you'll see Angela has got your food, and then it's somebody who's a man who's clearly not an Angela. He's probably a Mehmet or a Hassan, you know? And it's like, it happens because that's how these people get their jobs on the black market. Now, rather than slowing down the visa routes and having more stringent consequences on the gig economy that enables this kind of thing to happen, Keir Starmer comes out with digital IDs. Right?
Yeah.
It's like...
Yeah. Well, is now reversed on that decision, thank Christ.
You know, and so we're clearly not dealing with the actual problem, but there is a problem there that's happening. So again, all of this comes back to the whole, like, the NHS was built by immigrants and stuff. And I think, yes, it's absolutely true that the UK has been a country that has allowed migrants to come in and contribute and thrive. That's not the same, though, as saying that migrants built the UK. Because if we keep on reinforcing that lie, then we're never allowed to quality control the people that we come in, because we're a basket case. We need it. And it's not true. The UK doesn't need me to thrive. For example, like it doesn't need me to thrive. I'm glad I'm able to live here and contribute, but it'd be a lie to kind of have an entitled mentality where we say, you know, without the UK was a fantastic country before I was even born. You know, I was born into great privilege. I've had the privilege of traveling to other countries as well. I've seen poverty. I've seen abject poverty. I've seen, you know, if you get thirsty, if you and I get thirsty, we can just go to our tap and get a drink of water. I don't know a single person from an African country right now who would feel comfortable to do that, because the quality of water and the sanitation just is not there.
Yeah, I went to South Africa 5 or 6 years ago with my family, and we went to one of the shanty towns there. I can't remember which one. And I was blown away by it, because you're walking around and you've got I think you had to walk a mile to each. It was just a tap. It was a pipe that came out of the ground and a tap. And it was the communal water source for every single house within that 1 mile. It's absolutely mental. And most people don't see that. Most people don't realize that people are genuinely still living in that amount of poverty.
In my grandmother's village of origin in Sierra Leone, it's called Mobai, Sierra Leone. So I set up a charity there because I just saw what was happening and thought, wow, like I'm so privileged, man. Like compared to what they have. And we installed water fountains in 3 different schools, and each of those water fountains literally services like 600 children. Each water fountain services 600 different children.
What were they doing before? Did they just not have it, or did they needed to go somewhere else?
They had to walk half a mile to a stream. Yeah.
Right.
And now they have water fountains in their school. And we take for granted what has been built here in the UK. Like what we have has been built is something that we are extremely blessed and privileged to have, but we need to protect because it can be lost. Like these things can be lost if they're not maintained well. Yeah. And if we you can't it doesn't make sense, just logically speaking, to say that the UK depends on migration or needs migration to survive from countries that are not nearly as developed as the UK. That just doesn't make sense. You can say there are individuals within those countries who have a lot of skills and a lot to offer, and that's certainly true. But you can't just completely demographically change the UK and expect it to still be the UK. There has to be...
Yeah, there's a difference.
Yeah, there has to be a dominant culture.
Yeah, there's a difference between a skilled worker visa and... Yeah, sorry.
Just going to say, there has to be a policy of assimilation that is strongly encouraged. So you can have, when you're in your house, you can cook your jollof rice and you can cook your chapati and you can have your foods and all that kind of stuff. That's fine. But what we're not going to do is spend 140 million pounds on translation services and DEI in the NHS. What we're not going to do is have signs, use taxpayers' money to translate Whitechapel into Punjabi or Urdu. And that is happening en masse and needs to be dealt with.
I'm very aware of the timing that you need to go. I'm going to ask you one more question before you do. How do you switch off from all this? How does it not overtake your life and just make you miserable? Because you seem like a pretty cheerful guy. You got a good sense of humor. How do you get on day to day and actually enjoy life around you?
I appreciate it. That's a flattering question. You're right, man. Like I try and balance 2 things at the same time. I do try and balance a really serious and honest outlook of the future. I mean, these are really important conversations we're having. And I think about if things are like this now, then, in 20 to 30 years time when my kids are my age, 20 to 30 years time when my kids are my age, I had to do the maths quickly. They're going to deal with something much worse if this tide doesn't turn. And that makes me see the seriousness of things. And then there's also the fact that as a Christian, I do believe that one day we're going to stand before God. And I want to let people know that you can stand before him not worrying that he's going to punish you for your sins because you turn to Jesus for forgiveness. And that's a really serious weight. At the same time, I realize that I'm a small piece of a big puzzle and that God has given me responsibilities. And so my first responsibility is to my wife and my children, which means that as much as I might want to leave a better world for them in 2 to 3 decades, I've got the opportunity to be present now. And I don't want to miss that by focusing too much on the future. And then, just playing with kids really helps to remind you that there's more to life than that. And my wife is extremely supportive as well. So, we've got a great marriage, and that's really really humbling and keeps me grounded as well. And so that helps me when I handle it well, because there's sometimes when I let the stresses of life and stuff really consume me. When I handle it well, like the season I'm in now, helps me to still go forward with the serious stuff that needs to be addressed, whilst at the same time realizing that, look, I can only worry about what's in my hands to worry about, and trust God with the rest.
Sure. Yeah, there's nothing like kids around to keep you silly, remind you just how easy life can
I mean,
be.
even before we jumped on this recording, it's like my she's meant to go for her nap and she's screaming because she doesn't want to nap.
I think I heard her at one point just running around screaming.
Yeah. Hopefully that didn't cut too much into the audio. But,
not at all.
But yeah, just things like that. It's like, we have these conversations about YouTube and stuff like that. And to them, I'm just dad, right? It's like, I'm just dad, especially whilst they're young. So
100%. It's a nice place to be. Amazing. Thank you so much for this. This has been a really nice conversation. Where can people find your work if they want to see your videos online and your website as well?
So if they want reasons to trust in Christianity and trust in Christ over other religions, then Faith Talks is the website. Faith Talks on YouTube, or the YouTube channel. And if they want reasons to be proud of Britain and our Christian heritage, then Emmanuel Ayoola, my name, is that channel. Those are the main 2 channels that I'm on. I don't have the capacity or bandwidth for X and TikTok and stuff like that, so you'll find me on YouTube.
That's fine. I try TikTok, but it's painful.
It is, man. It is. And X just feels like information overload. So, yeah.
I know. It's a game you got to play.
Yeah.
But it's a horrible
game.
Man. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Thank you so much, man. This has been really good.
Thank you.
Cheers. And hopefully let's do this again sometime.
Absolutely.
Speak soon.
All right.
Cool.
Take care, man.
Cheers.
Speak soon.
Bye.